Live from the CII Budget Studio in New Delhi, Rahul Kanwal and Govind Raj Ethiraj bring you a Headlines Today special presentation, Beating the Slowdown, Budget 2012.
We've heard from industry, but what are the politicians expecting Pranab Mukherjee would deliver on? I want to go across now live to Vijay Chonk, joining us from there, D. Raja, senior leader of the CPI. We've heard this morning, massive crisis facing this government. The fact that the DMK is saying that they will boycott the budget speech. Do you think, and you know the party very well, do you think, Mr. Raja, they're indulging in a game of brinksmanship? Do you think Karunanidhi will actually boycott this budget, not support the government, or do you think this is just political posturing, Mr. Raja?
I do not know what is the decision of the DMK. I know only one thing, DMK is part of the government, and I don't know what stand the DMK is going to take. If DMK boycotts the budget, is it the beginning of the political process that DMK would walk out of UPA coalition? Work out of the government? I do not know. It is for DMK to explain. But today is budget day. We are discussing budget. You discuss budget issues.
No, as far as the budget itself is concerned, there's a lot of talk about the need to bring down expenditure. Growth is slipping. That's what everybody here at CII is talking about. But what does the left make of this? What do you think, Mr. Raja, should be the key priority for the finance minister?
This government should not be guided by CII or FICCI or ASSOCHAM. This government should be guided by its own commitment to the people of this country. If you see the President's address, government has given number of promises. Government has identified some 5 security concerns. Number 1 security concern is livelihood security. How government can provide livelihood security to the people of this country unless the budget is going to be pro-people, pro-poor? I think if government stands by its own promise, government will have to step up investments in agriculture, government will have to step up investments on education, health and other social security measures. I do not know what Ms. Pranab Mukherjee is going to do, what the budget is going to
Sunil Alagh
do.
has a question for you, Mr. Raja.
I think the fact,
Yes.
Mr. Raja, I think the fact that the poor have to be looked after and agriculture has to be looked after and we need the nation to move together is a given. That is, nobody can deny the fact that we need to do it. But every time that we do something in a budget for 1 year, there has to be also a balancing act of where is the revenue going to come from. So if we just go on with schemes which are good, but we are giving it away, then soon enough you will be bankrupt, which you will then not be able to help anyone. Forget about the poor or the rich or anyone in the country. So I think what also we would expect from you is, what does the government do to generate revenue? Apart from, yes, there's nobody denying the fact that the poor have to be helped and we have to get everybody above the poverty line. But where is the revenue going to come from? What are your suggestions on that?
I would like to ask you, let us not scare the people or let us not scare the nation. Where is the revenue? And you calculate what amount of concessions, exemptions the government gave to corporate houses? How many billionaires have grown during this period in India?
I think his voice is gone. I can't hear him.
Okay, so he's asking, if you look at the number of billionaires that have been created, that's of course a very left-oriented perspective on this, but that's the question you keep coming into, whether it's with Devinder Sharma or it is with D. Raja.
I think what Chandraji didn't answer, and I'm more FICCI than CII, but let me just represent what we are saying. What can industry do? I am expecting the government to increase excise. It has to. There's no question. It has to remove some of the, the stimulus package that they had started, because now we have to let the industry run on its own. Where will industry come in? If you have a reasonable excise increase, the industry is not foolish enough to increase consumer prices, because then they'll affect demand. So where does the industry pay? They will say, and all CEOs know that they can go back to their boards and say, this year is going to be a little tough year, we'll make a little less profit, but let's keep demand going. Let's keep our growth going. That's how industry comes in, that even they will tighten their belt and they will absorb the excise and help not increase prices. So they help the poor. So there are many things which people ignore as to what industry. There is one demon that is being created, that, oh, every time you give them something, they eat it up and that's it. They go to sleep. And we are the guys, the poor chap. But ultimately, the poor chap, as I come back and say, it's the airline thing. You have to put the mask on your face first. You don't do it, you can't help anyone.
Tavleen and then Ankur, yes.
All right. You know, I think that what my left-twist friend on my right is forgetting
My left
is your left
Whatever.
friend. Okay. You know that for years we followed those policies of welfare, etc., and we lifted nobody out of poverty. India was as poor after the British left as till we started the economic reform process, led by the private sector. Without the private sector, there would have been no boom. In the past 10 or 15 years of reform.
But is there an argument that you should not have private sector?
No, there is. You've lifted 300 million people out of poverty in this country, right? So
Where are those figures coming from?
One minute.
Where are those figures coming from? Questionable.
Well, those are not just
Sorry,
as questionable.
you need to know the facts then. I'm sorry.
No, so when you have a mythical figure, it's a fact.
300 million people, where is the figure coming
Can I just finish what I'm trying to say? Okay, until the reform process was going forward, there was growth. There were roads being built. There was, infrastructure.
Right, so Tavleen, before we lose Mr. Raja, let's get him back in. Mr. Raja, you were saying that corporate sector is really has to really give much more and has benefited from large doses of subsidies and benefits, and therefore it cannot be asking you for revenue. Yeah, go ahead.
Come on, I didn't get your question.
No, I was just asking you to complete what you started. I mean, your point about the question was, where will we get the revenue?
No, now the time has come. Government will have to review some of its basic policies. At least government should draw some lessons from what is happening in US, what is happening in European Union. The neoliberal economic policies have proved to be disastrous. They have widened the gap between rich and poor, and income level gaps are so huge. That is why the people in US are fighting, European Union are fighting. Here in India, all sections of the people are on the path of agitations against the policies of the government. Now government will have to review some of its basic policies. This is number one. For revenue generation, on one side government claims the fundamentals of economy are sound. What are the fundamentals? According to me, the public sector undertakings in India, we have strong public sector undertakings. We have strong public sector banking industry. We have strong public sector insurance industry. Now the whole thrust is liquidate all government equities in public sector undertakings, banks and insurance companies, allow private sector. And private sector, yes, wants the government to be favorable to them, and they are guided by their own profit.
You as a poser for you. She wants to come in and ask you a question, Mr. Raja.
Mr. Raja, what do you think the Chinese economy is like? What do you think of what has happened in China? Is that a communist economy?
China, yes, we'll say, we'll discuss China. China is the second largest economy in the world, at least one of the largest economies in this world.
Is it a communist economy?
China now, yes, that's what I'm saying. Now China has the courage to declare that China will end poverty by 2020, if not in 2015. Can we have the courage to declare that India would end poverty by 2025? Or 2030? I am asking you why it is happening in India.
Is it a communist economy, or did they shift away from communist economics to become rich?
That is what it is. Yeah, Chinese economy is growing, and it is one of the largest economies in the world. In fact, China is one of the largest.
Mr. Raja, you are dodging her question. Her question is specific. Is it not a fact that they followed hardcore capitalist policies to pull poor people out of where they were and bring them above the poverty line? That's Tavleen Singh's question. Respond to that, sir.
What do you know about China? As though you know everything, and whatever you said I should accept, or the whole country should accept. China is following capitalist path. You ask Chinese Communist Party, you ask Chinese leadership, are they following capitalist path? They will be able to give you competent reply. Why?
No, they're just communist in name.
We are discussing.
Tavleen Singh and Sunil Alak both want to respond to you.
The problems in, we are discussing the problems in India.
No, but there is a possible solution there, is there not, Tavleen? Are you satisfied with the response you're getting from Mr.
He's dodging my question. I find it very amusing
what my government is doing.
that the communists of India support policies in China that are not considered communist, but here, if there's anything that sounds like reform, you oppose it. I find that very hard to understand.
What do you mean? No, what do you mean? China is China. Are we ruled by Communist Party of India here? Communist Party of India Marxists here. What are you talking? Communist Party of China is there as a ruling party. It is a different system. Are you following Chinese system? What are you discussing? Uncomparable, both uncomparable. India and China cannot be compared at this point of time. If you compare, only to compare how China is overcoming poverty in China.
We must look at how it's overcoming poverty, Sunil Alak. You know, is there a need for politicians to change also the way they think?
See, we were a socialist economy. We were not communist. We were a socialist economy during Nehru's time. We were somewhere in the middle. We were like pink communists. That didn't give us, everything was government. All the institutes of education was government. The steel plants were government. The power things were government. Everything was followed. Our planning system was the Russian planning system. That's where we started. And China also started the same way. And China has now gone away from it and is going towards, they're not going completely capitalist, but they're going out. Whereas here the Communist Party still stays within the old Russian and Chinese system. That's the question.
Okay, I think that's more than a question, it will remain a comment because I think Mr. Raja has to leave.
Mr. Raja has to go into Parliament. Let's just not stop him. Thank you very much, Mr. Raja. We'll come back to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I want to bring in Ankur Bhatia, the Executive Director of Bird Group. Thank you very much, Ankur, for joining us as we have this heated debate about where should India's money really be put. Should we try and boost industry or should we try and spend it on the poor? That's really the argument which Pranab Mukherjee has to decide on as he decides his priorities.
Well, I can talk about the aviation sector. I think in the last I would say 4 or 5 years, the travelers, or I would say the mass market, has been benefited tremendously with the low fares which have been existing in the marketplace. And those have come with the cost indirectly from the government, because obviously now you have banks which need to be paid back. You have the PSU Air India, which has got loads of debt with him. So the question which you asked, that, you know, in the aviation industry, that is already happening. The private sector is actually selling below their cost in order to make gains to the common man, but you've got an industry which is down by $5-6 billion US. So how do you extend that further? Because obviously, and the reason is because I think the government has not spent ample amount of money in infrastructure, because obviously we still have only 30 million people taking to the air against a population of 300 million people who can fly. There is no infrastructure in regional airports where people really want to fly to. So, you know, there is a huge gap, and I think it hasn't been looked into it, and just the whole process of actually attaining that is what needs to be looked into.
You know what I would just, that's not the question I was asking. What I want to point out is that we have a great capacity, all of us, that to have what is known as political blockage.
Right.
It's like a heart blockage, and that's it. You do a political blockage. How can you do a political blockage? Here's an industry which is for 1,000 rupees you can now fly, and somebody will pose a question, but what about the 300 million who can't walk from their house to another house? Now how do I answer that question? So unless you are able to, because you can stop any debate with this, you know, the moment you bring in poverty and you bring in do good, any logical debate is out of the window. The question is that if we are a country of 1.2 billion, as Tavleen said earlier, maybe we had only 250 million who were rich and 750 million who were not able to afford, and now we've come to 500 and 500. I don't want to get into figures, but surely we are alleviating poverty. So it is a gradual process. You can't turn around, what is the industry doing? What is this one doing? What is that one doing? I want everything. If you want everything, and if industry starts making losses, and if we collapse, there's no revenue, there's nothing to help.
Devendra Sharma is not happy as he listens to you say that.
I think this is a very clever way of putting it in a way that, you know, as if it looks hunky-dory for, if you don't do anything for corporates, everything is going to collapse.
It doesn't look
Let me answer that.
I'm saying it's a gradual process to help the poor. It cannot be solved in 1 year.
The 2008 economic crisis the world faced resulted in roughly $20 trillion losses. 20 trillion. There are figures like that. Now, if we had spent just $2 trillion to development or social sector, we would have wiped out poverty in this world. Why can't we spend $2 trillion on removing poverty, then spend $20 trillion on first feeding the corporates who the trickle down does not take place? I think it's a flawed model. It has seen the world collapsing. Why are we following the same model here?
Davinder, I think the counter argument to that would be that even money which goes towards social development and and keeps rising every year is not finding its way. So there is an equal administrative problem.
Let's improve that. Let's improve the efficiency of
Why
that
don't
system.
you
Why
ask
can't
for
we do that?
investment in
So
irrigation?
what's stopping us from doing that?
Why don't we do it?
What
Because we are all interested in only feeding the corporates.
No, is it
What about
is it one for
irrigation?
the
That's the
other?
only objective.
Where are you coming
We
from?
are seeing it every
The
day.
way-
Every day, that is what is happening.
The way
This
to
is the
make
point we were
it-
arguing. This is the point we were arguing.
Okay,
The
the way
world is collapsing
debate
and we are following the same model which the
I
world
want
is
to bring
following.
in Tony Tyler and let's listen to what he has to say, someone looking at this argument from the outside. The world is collapsing and we are only interested in saving the corporates, not worried about the poor.
Well, it doesn't appear that way to me, I have to say. I mean, looking at, again, the aviation sector, which is my area of knowledge, what we see here in India is a sector which, compared with other parts of the world, is very highly taxed. The costs are very high of operation, particularly, I mean, airport charges are going up through the roof. And the infrastructure is very poor, as the gentleman said, compared with the rest of the world. And as a result, the aviation sector in India is not doing the job that it could be doing to stimulate economic growth, to stimulate
Do
social
you think this
development, which
comes
will
out
help
of
all
warped
of India.
policies and a warped notion that you can keep railway fares low because you don't want the poor to pay more, even if they're willing to pay for better services, cleaner toilets, and because aviation is apparently the rich man's mode of communication, therefore you charge him more?
I think aviation has long since stopped being simply for the rich. I mean, clearly, it's...
Do you think the government views it like that? And that's part of the problem. That explains the taxation structures.
Well, if that's how they see it, then I think they're missing a trick here, because I think if they would look at it in a broader context, they would see not just... Aviation is not only for the people who fly in it. It's for the people who work for the companies who help to supply it, whether they're catering companies, whether they're loading and unloading aircraft, handling bags. It's not simply for the rich.
So,
it's something that can
I think
provide
it's a good time
employment
to come to. But you can make money in aviation business, isn't it? I mean, you're a better example than.
What you mentioned, yes, aviation industry is taxed. Is that tax being put to the use of developing the sector more? Every job in aviation or hospitality actually creates another 8 or 10 jobs in the whole industry. Now, we are just at the pinnacle. We're just at
the issue is taxation such a big burden? It is a burden. I mean,
it is a burden for sure. It is definitely a burden.
But not so much that it's putting everyone out of business.
Well, I mean, I think that the reason why it is happening because of the fact that because of taxation, because of the input cost, which is, I guess, in this particular case, fuel, is 55% of your operating cost. Now, if that is taxed to a level which is unaffordable, of course, I mean, you have a problem. Now, the problem is that people
can make money, I think.
People can make money as long as the capacities are regulated and the government spends ample amount of money in infrastructure development. Because obviously you still have a lot of people who you still can't get to flying. And they can afford to fly today.
Right. So Vivek, you were going to say something.
I wanted to talk about agriculture, or we can talk about it later, whenever you want it. See, one simple point is nobody disagreeing that agriculture needs better focus, it needs more investments. Let me give you some numbers. India, in all Asian countries, has the largest public sector expenditure going to agriculture as a proportion of GDP. Do the comparisons. But that money is going more in subsidies rather than proper investment. There is a trade-off between the subsidies that you give to agriculture and the monies that you can commit to agriculture in terms of investment. I think that ratios need to change. Number two, you have 80–90% of your farmers who are half an acre, 1 acre. No matter how much you invest, there is an upper limit to their prosperity. You need to move these people out of agriculture. Other sectors need to grow also faster so that they can absorb these people. And you have a much more viable agriculture. That is the only point I wanted to make.
There's this very interesting comment I have, Dr. Bhanumurthy, from Shankar Sharma, the Chief Global Trading Strategist of First Global. Looking at the India growth story going down the drain, he says, we are very cautious. We were doing so well. We have, through our own stupidities, destroyed the world's confidence in us, destroyed our own self-esteem, destroyed our momentum. We deserve to suffer for our follies.
No, I think I don't completely agree with that statement, because if you see yesterday's IMF report, I mean, they have brought out a report on G20 nations. I think among the G20, I mean, within the G20 you have 10 advanced countries and 10 emerging market economies. India is doing much better than most of the countries. I think the slow growth in this last year is not completely because of the domestic factors alone. Of course, there are many other factors, but it's also because of the external environment. And also we have been fighting the inflationary situation. So overall, if you see that 7% that even Economic Survey says, 7% is not a bad number given the external conditions.
Right. So, Vivek, I think we're going to run into the budget very shortly. So, if you were to start summing up now, I think we've highlighted some issues that we're all fairly exercised about. So, let's begin with you. Three things that you want the Finance Minister to do.
I would in fact point my finger in one direction: revive investor confidence. That will be critical, and through restoring macroeconomic sanity, macroeconomic balance. If you don't get investor balance, if you can't trigger off your investment rates into a higher territory, you won't get higher growth rates. Without higher growth rates, you won't get more revenue, you won't get more inclusive growth also, because you won't get the ways and means to put more money for the poor. That's it.
Okay. Ankur, we're seeing the economic survey say coalition compulsions are destroying the growth story, that we're not being able to get things done because of coalition compulsions. Do you give the government that their intentions are right, they're not being able to deliver?
See, that is definitely an issue, of course. If you see the mix of the parliament today, and I've never seen that, in the previous years of my existence in the corporate sector. So I think that is a huge issue as well. But I'll agree with the gentleman. He said it is very important for getting the investor confidence back into the country, because today's date there are huge issues and everybody is aware of them. And unless it is those in macro level are looked into, of course, I mean, we will continue to have a look at continue to see what is being done now.
Okay, let's get Devinder Sharma. We've heard from the corporates. Let's get you to talk about what your key expectations are and how will the finance minister fund them. Answer both those questions simultaneously.
I think the question of revenue has come up again and again. The first and foremost is the government should withdraw the revenue foregone clause completely. There's no need to give 5 lakh, 6 lakh crore every year to the corporate sector. That is one. Secondly, we need to have a tax on what is called as on commodity trading. We are trading now 100 lakh crores and we don't have any tax on that. We once had a tax brought in by Mr. Chidambaram, and it wasn't even, the notification was not issued. Next budget it was withdrawn. I think that should be taxed. The rich people are beyond a limit should be paying tax, and the small investors should not be paying tax. That is another clause. And the third and foremost is the social sector should receive these subsidies. Let us not forget that this is a sector which the country requires to develop. Human capital is the most important capital the country needs to invest on.
Tax the rich more, Sunil. That's what Devinder Sharma says. That's where you can get the additional revenue from. That's where you can cater to the social sector.
I have no problems in increasing taxes for the rich. Okay, if you are saying that the rich have to pay some extra taxes, I don't think the country today should really get too excited about it. My only point is that when you are taxing the rich, you are taxing the rich individual. Fine. But if you are talking about companies that are actually adding to your tax revenue, and if you're going to tax them, you are actually going to make it counterproductive. That's all. But individually, yes, I think we need to increase excise. We need to increase, and we need to take back some of the stimulus that we've given over.
Let's not forget that there was a time when we had a 97% tax rate.
Yeah, I know,
so let's not
but I'm not talking.
And we discovered that it was counterproductive.
No, but the point is that I want to just sum up once again. Nobody is saying that the poor don't have to be looked after. They have to be looked after. But we are expecting it all to happen in a one-year budget. A budget is generally very tactical. It's 75% tactical for the year and 25% strategic. We are wanting the budget to be 100% strategic. Then call it a 5-year plan. Don't call it an annual budget. So we have to focus on this year. What do we need to do? He's got political compulsions. He's got fair weather friends. As I said, FARE, Mamta is just a fair weather friend. But in all that, I would still say, let him present a budget that the nation needs. Let Parliament discuss it. Let the whole nation see it. Let everybody understand which political party is saying what. And then when the election time comes, hopefully
but we can counter-argue that by saying that then that could end up like the Lokpal bill, where you express the right intentions, but nothing comes out of it. So all the people actually get to see our intention, and then your fair weather friends pull the rug from under the government's feet, and nothing happens.
But then when you go to the elections, you say, see, this is what happens. So now bring one party in power, so that they don't have this question of depending on everyone.
I need to head into a very quick break. We just have a few moments to go before Pranab Mukherjee rises to present the 81st General Budget, his 7th budget, being viewed very closely by people in India and across the world. Will he provide that much needed injection which will boost investor confidence, get the growth rates up? We will look at what happens, get you some more perspectives as we wait for Pranab Mukherjee to begin on the other side of a very quick break. Stay with us, we're back in a moment. Stay with us.
Presented by Supertech, yours for life. In association with Binani Cement, for generations to come.
Any deduction under section 80C, that should be enhanced, because 1 lakh is not sufficient for them. And the second thing is that for the equity investment, since everybody knows that equity market is not at all working, this thing should be dropped from the equity investment. Equity investment should be dropped from 80C. And another thing is that upon the CDR has already been reduced, but the credit and advanced to the SMEs is not the real picture which has already been proposed by the FM in the last budget.